Hi and welcome back to Love English. I'm Leila, and in today's lesson I want to share some very British expressions. Expressions that are classic in the British English language. Expressions that have got a certain amount of history to them. They're not new, they are old. And by using some of these expressions, you're going to help yourself sound more native, maybe a little bit more sophisticated. You're going to find new ways to express yourself in English. And of course, you're going to be able to understand native speakers. These expressions, idioms and phrases are really strange, some of them. You might be able to understand them through a clear context, but I wouldn't be surprised if you were totally confused. So let's get started. Today, 16 classically British, vintage, sophisticated, strange expressions, idioms and phrases that we commonly use in English. So you might want to get that cup of tea, Earl Grey of course, and get ready to learn. Don't forget, you might want to take notes. There are 16 of these expressions. Right, so we've got our tea and we're pretty comfortable. I'm sat on my sofa rather than having a blank screen behind me, just because I find it a little bit more comfortable. And I'm going to get started. Let's have a look at number one. Now, number one, don't worry if you're a horse lover, this isn't literal. To flog a dead horse. Now, flog is kind of an old way to say beat. It's not very nice. You wouldn't want to flog someone. But essentially, when you flog a dead horse, you are beating a dead horse. Not literal. Don't panic. What it actually means is to waste your time, your effort on something or someone when you're not going to get any results. You might be trying to get somebody interested in an idea or an activity. Oh, come on, it's going to be so much fun if we go for a swim in the sea. No, I really don't fancy that. You are flogging a dead horse there. So it's when you are wasting your time, you're making an effort and you're not going to get any benefits or results from it. Now, the history. The first record of this expression was heard in 1859 in the Houses of Parliament. There was a written record of the politicians at the time debating, and someone used the expression, "You are flogging a dead horse," or something to that effect. So there you can see just how old this expression is, and it is quintessentially British. You're unlikely to hear it in the US. So remember, next time you feel like you are doing something or trying to convince a person to do something or to agree with you, you might say, well, I guess I'm flogging a dead horse here. If you're speaking with a native person, they are going to be massively impressed. Number two. This expression dates back as far as the 14th century and was first written in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. So some of these expressions do, of course, come from literature and some of our greatest writers. A fish out of water essentially means, and this is one that maybe you could guess, that you're in an uncomfortable or unfamiliar situation. So when she travelled to America to start her new life, she felt like a fish out of water. To be in a situation where you feel uncomfortable or maybe just unfamiliar. It's something new, something you're not used to. So can you think of a time that you felt like a fish out of water? Did you go to a party where you didn't know anybody? Did you start university or a new school or go and travel to another country? What kind of situations have you been in where you felt like a fish out of water? Now, number three was first recorded in around 1738. By an Anglo-Saxon satirist. I don't really know who they are. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, just that the expression is pretty old. So this expression, a sight for sore eyes, you're a sight for sore eyes, essentially means that you are pleased to see someone, that they are a welcome or pleasing sight. Now, of course, sore eyes, painful, really sounds like you would not be happy to see them, but no, it is referring to being happy and pleased to see somebody, and usually in a situation where you didn't expect to see them. So if somebody comes around to your house and you hadn't expected them to visit, you might say, well, you're a sight for sore eyes. A pleasant, a pleasing sight that was kind of unexpected. Expression number four is often confused, even by native speakers, thinking it should be for all intensive purposes. It's not intensive. It is for all intents and purposes. For all intents and purposes. Now, this expression you might find a little bit more difficult to use it in the correct context. Essentially, it means in a practical sense, in a very important respect, meaning almost or almost completely. So let's have a look at an example to help you. Escape from the prison was, for all intents and purposes, impossible. Getting my grandmother to use Netflix was, for all intents and purposes, highly unlikely to happen. So there, I've given you 2 examples of how we use that rather unusual expression. Now, how far back in English history can you find this expression? Well, in fact, it goes all the way back to the reign of Henry VIII. Yes, 1547 was the first record of this expression being used. And its origins come from English law. For all intents and purposes. In fact, it's still an expression you're likely to hear used in English law. For all intents and purposes. Number 5, as keen as mustard. As keen as mustard. Now, mustard is a condiment. You can get English mustard, pretty strong, French mustard, that yellow condiment you might have on the side of a roast dinner or in a sandwich with meat. I'm not the biggest fan, but hey, whatever you like. Now, as keen as mustard, if you recognise that adjective there, I am keen to do something, it means you're very enthusiastic and eager. She was as keen as mustard to start university. He was as keen as mustard to go travelling. Now, this expression is a little bit more uncertain, but the earliest recording of this expression is around 1640 in literature. They usually are. However, it could be that it originates from the Keene Mustard Factory. So the first mustard factory in 1747 was owned by Keene and Sons. So there we go, a little bit of history to do with food for you. Number 6 is a really lovely expression that you'd probably hear from your grandmother if she was English. Certainly heard it from mine. Look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. Look after the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves. So, any guesses what this might mean? If you take care of small amounts of money, then you'll end up saving a lot. So it's a little bit of advice that you might hear from your grandmother. Now, the origins of this expression, it's sometimes thought that Benjamin Franklin, an American president, actually coined this phrase. However, this is usually disputed, the origins of which we think are thought to be around the late 1600s or early 1700s in British Parliament. Basically, the Chancellor of the Exchequer was thought to say, take care of the pennies and the pounds will look after themselves, which really, for somebody that was in charge of the country's money, not a bad way to think. So, British politics thought to be the origins of this expression, not my grandmother. Number 7, a little birdie told me. A little birdie told me. Now, this expression actually dates back as far as the Bible, so it's pretty old, one of the oldest. And it basically means I've heard from somebody. You're not telling them who told you, but someone's told you something that maybe was a secret, maybe was something that you weren't meant to know, but you could say, a little birdie told me you passed your exam. A little birdie told me you were engaged. So you've heard something that might be unknown to others. A little birdie told me. It's not a bad thing. It's not quite like they let the cat out of the bag, which means they've revealed a secret they shouldn't have. It's simply, I've heard from someone. And in fact, even Shakespeare used this expression in some of his plays. Number 8, to spend a penny. This is quite a famous expression. And if you didn't know, it's actually referring to going to the toilet for a wee, not the other thing. So basically this expression comes from a time where to use public toilets you needed to pay a penny. Nowadays, if you go to Waterloo Station, it's like 50p to go for a pee. So it's pretty expensive. But if you want to say in a nice way, oh, I just need to go and spend a penny, then you're saying I need to have a wee, which when you're in public might be a slightly nicer way to say it. And certainly if you use this expression with a teacher or a native friend, they will be massively impressed that you know to say spend a penny. Oof, I really need to spend a penny. I've drunk so much tea. So number 9, 18th century horse racing. 18th century horse racing. Not a topic I'm very familiar with, but essentially where this expression originates. A turn up for the books. A turn up for the books. This is an unexpected stroke of good luck, for something to happen that gives you good luck that you hadn't thought was going to happen. So it was a turn up for the books that she decided to help out with the party. It was a real turn up for the books that he came round just when I needed him. Number 10, a bit more of a negative expression here, to have a fly in the ointment. Very strange, a fly in the ointment. Again, another expression that comes from the Bible, the King James Bible, and essentially it's referring to something or someone being a problem, spoiling a situation, causing issues in a situation that otherwise could have been very positive. So, for example, I'm really looking forward to going out Sunday. The only fly in the ointment is that we have to take my mother-in-law. Not my mother-in-law, I love my mother-in-law. I imagine some of you have got mother-in-laws that are a bit of a pain in the bum. We're all going out for dinner tomorrow night. The only fly in the ointment is I haven't got a babysitter yet. Who's going to look after the kids? So there you go, a situation that could be positive, but there's something or someone that's causing a problem. A fly in the ointment. Number 11, to eat humble pie. Humble is referring to kind of being modest, not thinking yourself so amazing, wonderful. So when you eat humble pie, you're not actually eating a pie at all or anything. You're basically having to apologize or to admit fault where you may have done something wrong or said something wrong. Now, this expression comes from the 14th century, where apparently when nobility, the aristocracy, killed particularly deer, they would leave the heart, the liver, the disgusting stuff inside for the servants, for the humble servants. So the servants that were poor and didn't have kind of a lot of wealth or anything really. So to eat humble pie comes from those times. Number 12, pardon my French. Pardon my French. This expression basically means that you're apologizing for saying something wrong or for swearing. Essentially, it's not French that you're saying if you're swearing, but you're suggesting that it is. Sounds a bit strange, really does. So if I swear and I say, oh, pardon my French, or if I say something rude, pardon my French, then I'm apologizing in a way for what I've said. This expression comes from the 19th century, where we used to take a lot of words from the French language, include them in ours and try and sound a little bit more sophisticated. Because of course, French is a lovely, sophisticated language. So pardon my French implies that you swore in another language, but you didn't. Everyone knows it's not French, so it's a weird expression. Number 13, a storm in a teacup. A storm in a teacup. An overreaction to a small or unimportant event. So essentially it's a small problem, but it's a storm inside the teacup. I don't have a teacup, I have a mug. This is a mug. Teacups are prettier. They look like this. So a storm in a teacup is an overreaction to something that really isn't very important. You might say, my friends have fallen out because they decided they didn't want to go to the same place on holiday. It's just a storm in a teacup. They'll sort everything out soon. So it's a small, unimportant argument that will probably, like most storms, blow over. Now, this expression actually originates from 52 BC. So this is probably the oldest expression that I'm sharing with you. It actually originates from a Latin phrase that essentially means a storm in a teacup. In American English, they would use the expression a tempest in a teacup, a tempest in a teacup. But for us, it's a storm in a teacup. Number 14, probably one of the best expressions here, hanky-panky, hanky-panky. Hanky-panky is referring to kind of not bad behavior, but usually sexual in nature. Mischievous behavior, dishonest or shady activity. But like I said, nowadays, hanky-panky, if you say, oh, we had a bit of hanky-panky, or were you up to a little bit of hanky-panky, you're referring to something sexual. It's more commonly used in this way. It was first recorded in 1841 in a London magazine. So there you go. It's pretty old and still sometimes used, but perhaps you haven't heard of it. We use it, but not commonly, usually in a kind of funny, joking way. Or a little bit of hanky-panky. Not a lot of younger generations would probably use it, but you might hear it in films. Number 15, to see a man about a dog. I'm just going to see a man about a dog. This is a euphemism for excusing yourself from a situation. Perhaps you're at a party or you're in the office and everyone's talking and you might say, just got to see a man about a dog. Now, you're not actually going to see a man about a dog, but essentially you're concealing, you're not telling people the real reason you need to go. Whatever reason that might be, you might have a doctor's appointment or, I don't know, something more personal, and you don't want to share it. So you could say, I'm going to see a man about a dog. It implies that you don't want to tell people what you're doing or where you're going. Now, this expression actually comes from the 1800s and was first coined by an Irish playwright. So maybe the Brits shouldn't claim that one. We'll give that to Ireland. I'm going to see a man about a dog. Very strange. Now, number 16, pot calling the kettle black. You could literally say it like that to someone. Pot calling the kettle black. Essentially, this means you're being hypocritical. You're accusing someone of having a negative characteristic which you yourself have. So, for example, if I said to my friend, wow, you really spend too much money on clothes. Well, pot calling the kettle black, I'm essentially telling them something, criticizing them for something that I myself do. Now, this expression, we think actually originates from Spain, and I think you guys still use this expression. However, obviously, from the days when we used to have pots and kettles, and they were both black, it kind of makes sense. You're saying that someone's different, but in fact, you have that same quality in common. So can you think of anyone that you could say, pot calling the kettle black? Has anyone been hypocritical and accused you of something that they themselves do? Comment below and let me know. In fact, comment below and try and use a few of those expressions. And remember, it's all about putting it into a context. We need to understand and use it in the correct situation. They were pretty advanced expressions, so don't worry if you need a little bit of practice using them. And of course, keep watching this week because we have got a lot of lessons to help you sound super British and really advance your English. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time on Love English.